How to get more wins playing ground strike? First things first, we're not going to speak about low BR fights and the ones where your targets have next to no armor. You probably never had problems with those. After all these targets can be taken out even with reserve biplanes MGs. Get rid of enemy targets, protect your own. Pretty simple. When you get in proper ground strikes, things get much more difficult. Now key targets are airfields, pillboxes and tanks. In other words, something that a lot of air armaments cannot deal with. That's where a lot of players start to lose battles. What can you do then? Piece of advice number 1. Settle on a specific role in combat. Ground strikes is a game mode where specialization is king, knowing all too well that you cannot win without destroying enemy ground targets. A lot of players try to be jacks of all trades. For example, they load a few small bombs or rockets on their fighter aircraft and, should an opportunity arise, try to attack airfields or heavy tanks. But the fact is, with bombs like those, you won't be able to deal a lot of damage to the enemy bases. They take years to reload, while also making your aircraft much heavier, turning you into an easier target. Tanks and pillboxes won't be a piece of cake either. You'll need to score a very precise hit, which is nigh on impossible to pull off high up in the air. That means that you have to get closer to the ground, which, once again, makes you an easier target. All in all, a fighter aircraft carrying bombs doesn't only fail as a fully fledged strike aircraft, but also struggles to fulfill its primary role. Is it worth it then? To be totally fair, there is sometimes a reason to get a few bombs or rockets as a kind of last resort thing to fuel your last desperate push. In all other scenarios, though, leave those ground targets to bombers and strike aircraft, or get into the cockpit of one of those specialized aircraft yourself. Piece of advice number 2. A fairly obvious one. If you decide to fly a bomber, get really good at bombing. At first it seems a pretty straightforward duty. Just press space at the right moment, right? Not quite. There are a lot of things to learn and consider even in arcade. Study the bombing capabilities of your plane. Get used to the degree of accuracy and timings of different types of bombs. Take a look at our bombing guide, for example, and just do it. Do it a lot. After a few dozen runs, you won't need much time to find the best approach to each given target, or plan your withdrawal. Bomber pilots aren't the only ones who should do some learning, though. If you, as a fighter pilot, want to dominate ground strike, you have to be aware of strengths and weaknesses of your common opponents, and know the bomber's blind spots. Also, know really well what your own aircraft is capable and incapable of. It's not just some 3D model after all. It's a representation of a real aircraft with its own set of merits and flaws, greatly influencing the way it performs, even in arcade with its simplified damage models, flight models, and physics. Piece of advice number 3. Have a plan. It doesn't matter what kind of aircraft you're currently piloting. If you just rush to the nearest target, you're already on your way to ruin. Yes, you can put your piloting skills to test, wrecking 1, 2, 3 enemy aircraft in the chaos of a low-altitude dogfight. But what's the point if the enemy uses this time to destroy key ground targets? Try a different approach. First, assess this situation and climb. This way you'll be able to make better informed decisions as to where to engage the enemy. Then act. Drive those pesky fighters away from your bomber's operational altitudes. Go berserk on the guy that is tailing an Allied strike aircraft. If there is no Allied bomber in the air, clear the sky above the key targets and invite them in. The dinner is ready to be served. Bombers and attack aircraft obviously need a plan as well. It never pays to just rush to the target in a straight line, especially if you're losing altitude. Okay, you got that target. What next? You find yourself surrounded by enemy fighters, flying a plane that has more holes in it than a cheese grater. What we suggest is that you should ask a fighter or two to cover you, climb to your own operational attitude, and then drop all your bombs in comfort. This way, you have far greater chances of success. Piece of advice number 4. Be aware of what's going on. Yeah, fight and damage models are simplified in arcade, but it is also the fastest and the craziest game mode of them all. The combat situation changes constantly, and the fate of the match can be decided in a few seconds. You have to learn to use this little time as efficiently as possible to make fast decisions and act on them without hesitation. A good starting point is just to be aware of your surroundings. Use the external camera to look around you all the time. Be aware of the info that allied players give, and don't hesitate to communicate with other players yourself. After some time, you'll not only be able to keep track of what is going on, but also anticipate a lot of enemy maneuvers. Grab the initiative, know your opponent, and make enemies dance to your tune. The victory will be yours.